Welcome to the Alain Elkann interviews, an unprecedented window into the minds of some of the most well-known and respected figures of the last 25 years.
Today we interview a very interesting person, a very interesting woman, Vuslat Doğan Sabancı. Vuslat Doğan Sabancı is a multi-faced woman in the sense that she studied economics, journalism at Columbia University in the United States. She had an apprenticeship of 1 year at the New York Times, then worked for the Wall Street Journal, and later on she went back to her hometown, to Istanbul, and she started working for her family newspaper or editorial group. The name of the group is Doğan Media Group, and the name of the newspaper you work for is
Hürriyet, which means liberation.
Hürriyet, which is the most important daily newspaper in Turkey.
Yes.
She was a journalist, an editor, a publisher, a businesswoman, until the family decided to sell the ownership or the majority of the group. And Vuslat also decided that journalism was not exactly anymore her way to pursue her ideal of freedom press and also interest in women all over the world. And therefore, after a period of meditation, of traveling, of interviewing, and also working at her own craft because she's also sculpting. She founded in 2020 in Geneva, in Switzerland, the foundation Vuslat Foundation. And now we are here in Venice at the Biennale of Architecture, where the Vuslat Foundation has presented a very interesting art project that is also photographed in the front page of the Financial Times, which is a work of Giuseppe Pennone, the sculptor and artist of Arte Povera, and it represents a tree that is planted in the water in front of the Arsenale, and there is a very big stone that is inside the tree. Now, Vuslat, can you please tell me why you started with this work of art in the Biennale Architecture, and what does it has to do with your foundation?
Thank you, Alain. I cannot imagine a better venue and a better project to start the foundation, which is promoting generous listening around the globe. This is the mission of the foundation. How do we listen better? How can we listen deeply to ourselves, to each other, and to nature? This Biennale's theme is how will we live together? So a very important component of living together, of coexistence, is not visual but audio. How do we listen to each other so that we can coexist? And Giuseppe Pennone's installation, it is so magical, so poetic, so simple but also sophisticated. It makes you stop, pause for a moment and wonder, why is this rock holding this tree up in the branches? And why is it rooted in the water? Magical, childish surprise, that an invitation to that surprise. And this is exactly what we want to invite the world to pause and to have that curiosity with each other, the connections that they can create with each other through listening, with themselves, but very important with nature. And I am very pleased that we found a project that connects the mission of the foundation, especially to nature. When we talk about listening, it's usually people perceive listening to the other. But there's so much wisdom we can learn from listening to nature. Trees I believe, are the best listeners on earth. The name of the exhibition is called The Listener, because for generations, trees listen to all living beings, and they hold secrets. They give a safe space. You know, in many of the cultures, people gather around trees to have conversations. And this is a symbol that we are launching the foundation with. This art piece, this installation of Giuseppe Pennone, is a symbol of invitation to reflect on this. And we want to continue this with different workshops, talks, and conversation meetings on this subject. And we want to have people think and reflect about it, also artists.
Maybe being a journalist, you have listened to many other people and told many other stories, but you realize that you didn't dig enough into yourself.
Yes. This is a very good point you're asking and raising, because the act of journalism has a lot to do with this mission and where I have come with this mission. Because in journalism, usually we are on a mission to write a news or to write a piece. And with that mission, we usually concentrate on the other person with a work. But when I was at a place when, with my profession, I needed to zoom out and see what I could do better in life. And that took me to a series of listening journeys. I call it now listening journeys. But then it wasn't planned like that. And in those listening journeys, because I had no obligation to write it to the paper, to bring a solution, I had no obligation. It was just a pure discovery. I wasn't going to put it together or find a solution for anyone. That simple act of listening, without the obligation on doing anything, really opened another door of listening to me. Even though I listened to many people for such a long time, this was another act of listening, without any obligation. Then I really realized that as I listened to them, I also listened to myself. Because I am also an actor in that listening act.
Journalism and publishing has been a long experience for you, right?
Yes.
I mean, you were very much involved, and you also fighted many battles through journalism, no? Especially
Yes,
for
yes.
human rights or women rights. Is the press in Turkey free to say whatever they want?
In 2003, we started domestic violence campaign. It was a taboo in Turkey then. Like many places around the world, domestic violence happens inside the family and you don't talk about it. And when I brought this idea that we should start a campaign and break this taboo, and this is a social issue that's not being talked enough, there was also hesitation within the editors, and we are a big newspaper, not a small niche newspaper. So this might have a negative quotation for the paper. But then everyone believed in it and we pushed it. Now, newspapers usually make news and it's for that day. And if it's on the agenda of people, they continue. If not, they stop. We did something very different. And I think this is one of the only cases in the media world I know. What we did, we said we will pursue this continuously with persistence for years, until these things change on it. So we even set up a hotline, the first hotline in Turkey that operates 7 days, 24 hours, with psychologists, with legal support, so that everyone from not only Turkey, from 42 countries, who speaks Turkish immigrants in Europe, everywhere, can call anytime, seek help, psychological and legal help. And so we took it as a mission. If media takes social issues, not transitory, but as a mission for a long-lasting to make change, there's a huge potential. And I've seen this in domestic violence. I've seen it in the girls' education also. In the girls' education, my sister Hanzade was also in another part of the media. And she started a campaign called Dad Sent Me to School. I'm talking about campaigns that last for 10 years. It's not daily. That's why I want to make the difference. With that campaign, when we started, the gap between girls and boys to schooling was 10%. After a short time we started that campaign, it became 0. Now there are more girls, yes, going to school and showing more success. Not only we did it, our persistence also motivated the civil society, the government take action. So I really believe in the power of media in this sense. This is very, very powerful, and I believe in this sense. But coming to your question about freedom of press in Turkey, there has been pressures on freedom of press. I think it deteriorated over the years. When I went into journalism, which was 1990s, and today it has been deteriorated. So it has been declined.
Yeah. Is this one of the reasons why you decided to sell the group?
It was very difficult to do journalism, yes. It was like walking on a thin ice. Because of the polarization in the country. I'm not talking only about the government pressure also. Because also when there's polarization, you need to pick sides. This is true for all media around the world because the economy of the media, economic model of the media, works on increasing circulation, increasing viewership. So you need to have more attention seeking. And for that attention, you need to pick sides. If you say, yes, this can be right and wrong, it has both flip side and both sides of the coin, then it's not interesting much.
Has it be black or white?
Black or white. You have to be black or white.
But is it possible in Turkey today to be against the government?
There are some against the government, newspapers and internet channels, but it's not very easy.
In the press world, there is today a huge change, right? There is also the fact that in many countries, starting in the United States but also in Europe, people read less and less paper newspapers, right? And they are more and more on the internet or digital. And therefore there is quite a big revolution in the world of media. People watch less television too because they look at the Twitter, Facebook. This is also a reason why you decided to step back because you didn't want to go into this new process of delivering the news.
I mean, I can't say it was a reason because it was a changing world from the beginning. When I was writing my thesis of graduation at Columbia Media Studies, my thesis, the theme was the end of the newspapers will come in 2003. So it was a projection in the future. So I came in the profession now thinking it was crazy, knowing that it will finish and from day one trying to change it because it was the start. So I can't say this was a reason, but maybe you're right, Alan, because we also knew that the good days of media was coming to an end.
Is it, after all the experiences you had, do you still think that journalism is a profession you would suggest to young people to do?
I still find journalism a very important profession. If it's done in the right way, it can be done in very different ways as well. So if you do it with the good values, I still think that journalism is super important for the world, and I would suggest it to the young people to have good values. It's a very, very important profession, bringing what is right and what is wrong, the news around and so forth. But opinion and news should be divided. So today, every border is becoming blurred, and the border between fact and fiction is becoming blurred. The border between opinion and facts is also news is becoming blurred, and these are dangerous. So values become even more important. The 5 Ks, where, when, how, the 5 important elements of writing a news is not enough anymore. You also need to put values of integrity and so forth.
ultimately, since you change your life, right? And it's interesting because you use one simple word and it suggests one simple thing, which is listening. Listening instead of speaking or instead of fighting. What does this word mean in practice in a foundation? How do you teach in school or in the university to listen? There are many religions that tell you this, that you have to listen to the other. But it is true that people don't listen much. So why did you decide to go in that sense? And what are you expecting from your foundation, from your job?
Through listening, we cannot solve crisis. But what we can do, we can prevent crisis. And this is where the world is going. Today, we're looking for the whole medicine industry is looking for preventive medicine. And listening is a preventive medicine for the world crisis. When the crisis happens, people fight. Then you cannot expect anyone to sit and listen. But if we can embrace and foster the climate of listening, the ecosystem of listening in the systems, education system, internet, civic society, business, corporate system, then government systems, then we can prevent crisis. There will always be conflict. And conflict is good because conflict also creates a good energy for innovation, for creativity, for improvement and growth. But with the conflict, how can we dance with the conflict? This is what listening is. How can we create a space that conflicts can play out in a nicely way, but it doesn't have to go in the crisis?
There are many conflicts all over the world, in Colombia, in Palestine, Israel, in not very long time ago in the ex-Yugoslavia. There are local fights. People want to be independent, right? In the Pays Basque or in Ireland or in several other parts of the world. So the conflict is, as you said, really part of human history and life. But people don't want to listen. They have one idea and they pursue this idea, and there is in the world of today eventually even more fanaticism, extreme ideas than there were before. And even the concept of democracy is in a kind of crisis, in many countries of the world.
Many places that you have referred to, like Israel and Palestine, there are wars there. So it's not conflict, it's crisis. When there is a war, there's a war. But is there a way that we can prevent those beforehand? Because polarization, war, also gives meaning and place to people. You're against or for. That makes it part of a community. So it's easy to be against. But to go beyond this, I believe that COVID has offered an opening for everyone to sit and to reflect on this. I believe that this is a unique time if we can, with courage, embrace what we can do differently if we listen. Now, in terms of how practically this would go, we are doing two things. I think it's super important to have people become aware of this. What is listening? So when I listen to you, am I really listening to you, or am I going into my own mind? Am I thinking about what I will ask next? Am I thinking about where I will go next? Am I thinking about, Alain is confirming my judgments, or Alain is not confirming my opinions? Or do I really listen you with all my senses, like to hear beyond you? So listening, generous listening, is making a commitment to really listen the other one without judgment and being present. Now, it's very popular to be present. What is being present? I think listening is the best muscle that you can tone to be present. Mindfulness are meditation. These are, for some people, they are not easy to go. But listening, everyone has this muscle, and it can be practiced, just like your leg muscles, arms muscles. It can be practiced and improved. For children, we need to put it in the education system so that children have a place to listen and to be listened to. I think children have the capacity to listen, but they are not being listened to. And because they are not being listened to, they grow into not good listeners. So in the education system, if we can put in the curriculum education system where we teach our children not only the best speech to give, but also to be good listeners, this is going to change the world. Youth today is in crisis, mental health crisis, especially after Corona. The statistics show that 60% of youth, if I'm not mistaken, in the United States, but I can go look into my notes and confirm, are in mental health crisis. So it's like depression, loneliness. Japan has appointed in 2020 Ministry of Loneliness. And if you ask about in the UK, I can confirm these numbers with you later, but in the UK you ask about loneliness and people say, I think like 55%, 60% of people say, I am lonely, regardless of who I have around, regardless of the family.
Yeah, but loneliness is something, listening is something else.
No, listening is the most important tool to connect.
I listen to you, you listen to me.
It's not a negotiation.
That's what I mean. There is one who listens and the other one who speaks. So then the other one who has listened then has to speak in order the other one to listen or not.
It doesn't have to be that way. If I listen you without waiting for my turn, you feel really listened. I'm not doing it just for...
This is a kind of psychoanalysis. No, you go to the psy and you talk and talk and talk, and he's supposed to listen.
But you pay for him to listen. This is not getting paid for listen. This is getting connection, and you discover the humanity.
But do you think that in this, because things have changed quite a lot, right? Once upon a time, without the technology, in a village, in a city, or whatever, people were meeting in the square. They were sitting in a bench, they were speaking in a cafe. Nowadays, they do a lot of that on the telephone. They chat one with the other a lot. The square, the cafe became the telephone. But still, people do read and listen to each other, right?
There is a difference with the square, the cafe, or what we call in Turkey the meydan. So those squares where people from all walks of life would come together. But with technology, we choose, even the technology chooses us, who we speak to. This is what we lost, Ellen. Exactly this
Contact.
is what contact, but contacting spontaneously with different people or versus contacting with the only people like minds.
So how do you examine this situation with coronavirus? I mean, there is a big difference between, let's say, more wealthier countries, the Western countries, or some empires, you know, like Russia, China, and so on and so forth, and poor countries, right? So they didn't have the same possibility of cure or access to vaccine than the other countries had. And still, for a long time before the vaccine, the whole world was suddenly in the same danger, more or less, right? The danger coming from here, there, China, India, New Zealand, whatever. And therefore we were all the same. Somehow we were all enemies. You know, you were afraid of the other. Everybody was afraid of the other for a long time, right? Therefore we kept distances as much as possible, right? But in the same time we use more and more technology like Zoom, just to take an example. And therefore we got used to working remote, outside the office, or to do an interview like this from remote. You know, you are in Timbuktu, I am in Northpole, and still we are together. But all that is not the square, is not the touch, is not the human feeling. But still, we listened, and we also listened to different things. One is related to what you said before at the beginning with the tree and the nature, right? we suddenly, in the silence of life, rediscovered trees, flowers, birds, noises of animals, because there were no aeroplanes, no cars. So we rediscovered the strength of nature, right? We were weak and nature was strong and beautiful in front of us.
Yes.
And in the same time, we watch television or read newspapers or read whatever agencies, and we had to listen all the time to news. You know, how many people died, how many people are ill. The virologist became the guru of these last months, right? The great virologist from America, the great one from Sweden, another one, and there were all these debates in television that people listened to, right? That's why you thought about listening, because we were obliged to listen, in a way, to listen to noises that we didn't listen anymore, like trees, like wind, like birds, and in the other side, to be bombarded by images and conversation about coronavirus.
This listening and the foundation was formed before COVID. So the formation was before COVID. But yes, COVID times made listening so important. I live in Istanbul most of the time. That's my home city, Istanbul. And I love living in Istanbul. No problem, and I enjoy it. But one day, it was one of those lockdown days. Sunday, it was the first lockdown in Istanbul. I woke up. I have a garden. I went to a garden, and the houses overlooking Bosphorus on the top. But it was another city. So beautiful. No one around. The birds singing. Bosphorus, no ships, no big ships carrying tankers. It's like a lake, almost. So quiet. And I go back when I'm in the city now, in Venice, in Istanbul, there's so much noise. I go back in my mind to that silence center. For all of us, we went through that silence, that experience you're describing. So it's in our body, it's in our system now. And we will be wanting to go there. So this is very powerful. With technology, what you're referring
But it's
to.
unsustainable with the economy, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, that silence we cannot lock down, and we all went back to our lives. But we can seek for a balance in our lives.
That's what you're looking for.
Seek for a
Seeking
balance.
for a balance.
Absolutely. Not
Between
making-
silence and noise.
Yes. It reminded us what we were missing out completely, that silence. And it was making us, our minds go crazy and our systems go crazy, and we as societies clashed. But that balance is going to make a big shift in our lives. With
Let
the
me just
technology.
interrupt you on this subject. Somebody wrote in your biography that you had moments of fear in your life. This silence was aesthetically or probably very beautiful, but there was a lot of fear in that silence. Not the fear of silence, but the fear of death.
Fear of what will emerge in the silence.
Fear that, am I going to catch it? Am I going to end in a hospital? Am I going not to breathe anymore? Am I going to die? Right? Therefore, you are my enemy because you may give it to me, or a child can give it to me. I mean, we lived in that fear.
We don't want to listen to that fear. That's why we escape to the noise. But that fear doesn't evaporate. It doesn't become obsolete. It's still there. We just are too fearful to listen to that. We all have that fear of death, and we all have fears of things that will emerge from also in our conversation. But also, we don't want to hear to that. That's why we escape to noise, whatever noise is for you. But it stays there. And if you can be courageous, listening is courageous. It's a very courageous act. If you stay to listen, then you become friends with the fear and it becomes smaller and your aliveness becomes bigger with technology. Up until now, technology divided like-minded people. It was unconscious, this production of technology, it was unconscious. So it brought many improvements to our lives. But we did not think of using technology in a way that we can create the new cafes, the new spontaneous gatherings, the circles that we used to have in ancient times. What if we think about technology in a different way, where we can find our unlike minds, not to solve problems, but to connect, to listen to each other, without solving a solution, without going into our minds to fight, to our feelings, to our human experiences, real life experiences. When I was listening to this woman who had a very different life from me, in a shelter in a small town in Turkey, when I was listening to her, without an intention to give her a solution about her life, she was at the point of dying, getting killed. You know, she was at that moment, she was sharing with me her feelings, her life, and I was not thinking of how I can save her life. But I realized how much I can connect to her feelings in terms of being a mother. We were all, just by listening, we were exactly the same. Actually, I thought she was a more courageous mother than I was. So these kind of encounters are what's going to make us as humans, as people, stronger, less fearful. In Tufts University in Boston, United States, we are setting up a center for generous listening and dialogue.
In Boston.
In Boston at Tufts
university.
University.
But your foundation is in Geneva, in London, and in Istanbul.
Yes,
right?
it's a Swiss foundation in Switzerland, and our offices are Istanbul and London. But this is a global issue. The boundaries and countries.
You mean the listening is a global issue?
Yes.
Yeah.
And our foundation is a global foundation. So we
But
want
what are you
to
in
promote
practice?
it everywhere.
I
Practice.
am listening to you,
Yes.
right? In
So-
practice, what are you going to do? I mean, here in Venice, you have chosen a work of art,
Yeah.
very symbolic,
Things.
that is
We are-
somehow
Yeah.
a metaphor or whatever of the Biennale metaphor of what's going on
Yeah.
today as a symbol, right? But are you going to keep on doing symbols, or what is the plan you have?
So we are developing toolkits, practices of listening. Our first, if we were a for-profit company, this would be our product. We're working on tools of how do you listen to each other. So we will give daily rituals of what you can do to listen. We will create new digital spaces for youth to listen to each other, and how do they listen to themselves, because for youth to listen to themselves is also very important. So we will be giving tools for them to practice it. We're setting up a center. We're creating knowledge hubs in academia, and the first knowledge hub is a center at the Tufts University, which is a generous listening and dialogue center. What they are going to do, it will be a hub where they will also develop these tools, but also try out these tools with the students in the university. They will develop not only knowledge, but also research on what happens when you are a good listener. What are the barriers to listening? Why do we listen? Why do we not listen? Imagine, Alan, if we could come up with a metric for listening, just like we have IQ, we have EQ, why not have LQ? If we can define what is a good listener is, imagine how much it would be embraced with the corporate world, and imagine it would be role models for the youth to become good listeners if the corporations would award good listeners. So
But
LQ defines this.
listening is your listening pacifier for your anxiety, or listening has to be linked with action. I mean, I listen to you because you tell me your problems, and as I listen to you, should I try to solve them, the problems? Probably you are right that people should start listening, and it has to be taught.
From the ground up.
You know, and it also has perceived as a quality,
Yeah.
Yes.
you know.
A
Muscle.
tool. Yeah, a muscle.
Muscle. It's a muscle that can be developed.
Yeah.
And I'd like to also the quality.
Yeah.
Because it's also, if we promote good listeners, if role models that youth look up, talk about how listening changed and improved their lives, then it becomes a virtue that the society looks up to. Today, the virtue is to be out there, and especially for youth, it's so bad. You have to look in your best look. You have to, you know, if you are silent in a school, then it's not good. You have to be, you know, we need to balance what we give credit to.
So this is also, you think you want to apply this to love. We live in a world where people send hearts all day long. They say, I love you all the time. Oh, I love you. Which doesn't imply anything, right? So it devaluates
Love.
Yeah.
the meaning of love, for instance, you know, and the nuances of love, because love can be desire, passion, tenderness.
Nuances of love. I love this.
Therefore, yeah, listening is good, but you have to learn how not to be passive in this.
Yes, so you have to know.
Listening can be, you know, watch TV and listening.
No, listening is an active act. So it's active. People perceive it as passive. That's why it's negative. People don't want to be in that place. On the contrary, listening needs courage, and listening is active. You need to be actively present. And when you speak, you can control what you say. When you listen, truly listen, you cannot control what you will hear. So it's courageous. It's an unknown field. I let Alan speak, and I don't know what he's going to say. What if he says something that I don't like? It's an unknown, so you don't want to go there. So it needs courage, but it's also a very active thing. With love, I believe people send so much love because there's a need to. There's so much fear. They're trying to balance it with love, 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 love everywhere. And I believe just like this, listening is also a need. Once we start talking about this and inspiring people, I believe people always going to open a space in their lives and
you see,
start using the practices.
Until you work on symbolism, you finance temple, you finance a work of art, you finance poetry, you finance symbols that are strong maybe and that are good and acceptable or not acceptable, it depends. Then we live in a world where time is money, and because of the internet we are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because there are news coming all the time. People are in a hurry, nervous to perform. If you don't perform good, there's another one who's better, you're fired. So we live in a world where listening is good, but it needs time, right? And people don't want to give time. Second issue, people are afraid of listening. They don't want to know. When the people came back, for example, from concentration camps after the war, writers like Primo Levi, like Elie Wiesel, like others who wanted to publish books of what they had done and seen to survive in Auschwitz, nobody wanted to publish that. It took 20 years before they could publish a book because people after the war didn't want to hear
it.
Right? They don't want to listen. So this is also part of the human defense of the human being, not to listen.
Not to listen.
To evade. And then they say in newspapers, they work with newspapers.
Yes.
People love bad news, right? If you give only good news, nobody will buy a newspaper, right? There must be drama, war, horrible things, you know. Because this is selling the newspaper.
That's true.
So you realistically imagine, and this is my question, a world where people you come from a family of investors, of people who work, who think of money and blah, blah, blah. Do you think it's realistic
Yes.
for the world of tomorrow to listen?
I think it's realistic, and I think it will happen, and I think it's super, super needed. In the corporate life, we were running around all the time trying to finish up everything. But because we do, and we think listening takes too much time, and we don't have time for that.
That's right.
But you know, the worst things happen. There's so much inefficiency because we don't listen to each other in the corporate life. Because everyone needs to take an action. And in today's world, everyone is a leader in what they're doing. Even if you are bringing a tea here, you take an initiative. Because you don't listen to each other, the system is not running efficiently. In the end, we're losing even more time. So I have experienced this as a business leader. But also, for youth, for example, especially for youth, there is a FOMO. You know what FOMO is? Fear of missing out. You have to be out there all the time. Youth are anxious because they can't miss out anything. We are also, I don't want to miss out one movie that comes out, one book, one conversation. There's so much information. Now we want to create spaces where we can experience the joy of missing out. JOMO.
And education as well.
I'm not doing this to miss out. I'm doing this for my goodness. And it's just, this is cool. This is joy. I can just be there, be here, and listen without any...
How will you teach with the foundation to listen?
We're developing now working with a design company, a Finnish company called Sonder, to design toolbox, which we call. It's the practices of listening. So for different communities, there will be different practices. For youth community, it will be different than how Alan will learn. For education, it will be, anyway, in September in Venice, we will come back here with our purpose companions who have tried out these practices, and we will do our big launch. So with a design company who is expert in experience design, a Finnish Sonder company, we are now developing these with professors from different universities, with users themselves. We have created expert groups who are working on this with professors from Harvard. We have many different school systems. It's a group of 25 people. With this company, we are now deep diving, so they are experts in this. And we will have our first edition of practices for the youth community. Then we will bring another one for civil society. Because with the issue with the civil society wants to bring solution to immediate problems, environment, gender, immediate problems. But what they do, they always think they know the answer. They don't listen to co-create the answer. And sometimes the answer they have is not good for that community, but they don't know how to listen to that community. So we will also bring tools which will facilitate and make their journey easier one and more productive to listen to the community and to themselves, to bring more interesting solutions and less expensive solutions. Civil society, there's so much money that's going in the civil society to do good in the world. But is that money being spent well? In the MIT as well, we're giving fellowship to transmedia storytelling, so different ways of storytelling that facilitates listening. So we're giving fellowship also in the research and the work
MIT.
At MIT.
And this listening will become a degree like philosophy, like part of the humanities,
We would like
philosophy,
it to be.
Theology or religion, and in the same time you create this science of listening, right?
I think the science has not been focused on this much.
How is the history of listening? I mean, today, I take an example. you are a journalist. Today, very wealthy people, it's not a good example, create foundations, right? In order to try to show that they're doing good. They are very rich, but nevertheless they give the paintings to the museum, money to build hospitals or universities, which is good. Always happened. The mécène, even in Venice, people, very rich people committed artists to create a work of art. So this aspect of disparity, it's bigger, but it happened before. What happens is that politicians who campaign to be elected, the political society, political world doesn't listen. There's more discrepancy between politicians and the people than between the rich and the poor. In other words, the rich and the poor sadly existed. It's not so easy to level it, right? And many experiences like communism didn't really succeed. Because if you're brighter, you obviously succeed better than someone who's stupid. And unfortunately, this is the injustice of life, right, in a way.
If you're born rich, it doesn't mean that you're brighter. So I have an objection to that example.
No, not at all. But if you are not, you will lose it at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Right? Because there is a concept of meritocracy, right, in the succeeding. In the politics, either you have dictatorships, where the dictator says what you have to do and you just do it, otherwise they kill you. Or in the democratic system, politicians don't really understand the needs of the people who vote for them, because they don't listen to the problems that people have. They just listen to consolidate their power and to keep their power. Are you going to give listening schools in the political issues? I mean, there are no values in politics anymore. There are no really politics. The only politicians we know are dictators because they are there. And people are not at all, they don't like to go into politics. So the best are not going into politics. As much as they don't go into religion. And obviously, there are always exceptions because they don't listen.
Yes, at universities we hope and we aim to have this in the curriculum, to have listening. We're aiming for
TOS is the first step to that.
Yeah. So how it will be in the curriculum, I don't know, but this is our goal, that it should be taught in the education system, not only in universities, but starting from K-12. So politicians, the youth and the children, when they graduate, they become politicians, they become business people, they become civil society, they go to all walks of life. If we work with them at the level beforehand, wherever they go, they become good listeners. That's our goal. So it's not possible to go to a politician and say, be a good listener. It's not realistic. We work with the youth and to become good listeners, and when they are out in the world, they are good listeners of themselves, they are good listeners to nature, caretakers, and each other. And then they become either politician, business, or civil society.
So, your foundation, the Vuslat Foundation, which is just new, it started in 2020, had its first symbolic metaphor in the Biennale of Venice through sculpture by Giuseppe Pedone, right? Mm-hmm. What are the following steps? With a Finnish designer?
We're preparing practices of listening and spaces for listening for the youth, which we will launch in September, again in Venice.
And where these packages will be, all over the world?
All over the world. And we will start first digital, but it will have physical component as well. And we will start doing, from July onwards, workshops, talks, podcasts on the subject of listening.
And who is going to do that? Professors?
Professors,
Thought leaders.
artists, leaders,
Thought
leaders. We're going to invite thought leaders on this. So there will be workshops also open to the public and podcasts about it.
And to go back to you, to end on this Vuslat, what are you doing? How do you organize your life? I mean, you still have many commitments, board meetings in the family business or in other societies or charities and whatever. But how do you work? What do you do? How many people work with you?
Today, my passion, I founded a foundation, but foundation is not important for me because it needed to be a legal platform.
Yeah.
My passion is to start a movement that creates a listening climate in the next 10 years. I want to do this in the next 10 years to start this movement. And I invite everyone to start thinking about it and joining this dialogue. This is my passion.
You are the leader. Do you have ambassadors?
Yes.
How do you collect people to come with you?
So I have an advisory circle, which it's also published in our website. You can go see. They're all very important people that endorse this journey with me from the beginning. But we are increasing our purpose companions every day.
Do you think that people, through the course of history, were listening more than they do today?
Yes. I think this is
When were they listening more?
when there was encounters in circles, in cafes, when life was slower and when they were more in touch with nature than today. Today, there is a huge population living in very crowded cities that has very small, very limited interaction with nature and very limited time to pause. So those
So,
times
in
there
other
were more
words,
listening.
encourage companies to change their philosophy. And do you think they are understanding that in today's world? I mean, they speak all the time about sustainability, right?
Yes.
It's a new word, but are they giving to the people who work with them as a plus and not a minus enough time to listen?
They will have to, because currently, look, after this COVID, many of them are suffering. There is a different working environment already created. People are going to go a little bit back, but not totally back. So the life will be already different. It's already different for all businesses. So they will have to give credit to listening. They will have to promote the good listeners. They will have to give more time to be in touch with nature also. So there will be different interactions.
So you think that the world of tomorrow will be able to, if it will be good, will be able to combine technology and, let's say, listening?
I think in technology there will be more spaces created for listening rather than it is today. Look at Clubhouse. You know Clubhouse?
Yes.
Only audio. It's, I think, one of the first spaces that's created for listening now. Now there will be a lot more and a lot more innovative things that will happen. So,
And listening goes with talking.
yes, dialogue is part of it. But first we need to take this initial step of remembering listening, reviving that culture.
There's a lot of talking about yoga, about meditating, about dieting, about better living, and so on and so forth. Listening is a very old concept, very simple, right? But not much followed today. I have the impression that people listen less and less.
Yoga, meditation, mindfulness, these are all good and necessary, but they are good for some people, not everyone. Listening is approachable to everyone. Everyone knows and understands listening because it's in our lives already.
Yeah.
So this is an invitation to do something that we are already always doing. Do it in a better way so that it shifts your life in a good way.
So would you like to create, or to be helped to create a chain of listeners?
Yes.
I mean, all over the world, people who listen.
Yes, because this is the first step of changing the climate to listening. So it's a climate balance we're looking for.
Listening is obviously an attitude, a muscle, as you said. But it's a word, right? this word should enter into the words of today, like sustainability, like love, like, all these things that everybody talks about. Listening should be, something you have to remember to people.
Remind to people.
Remind.
Yes, because it's an ancient word that we have forgotten a little bit. Storytelling is now very fashionable. People talk about storytelling all the time. How do you do better storytelling? This is already being taught. We should also remember the listening part, which is when there is a storyteller, there needs to be always a listener. And that is also very important. That's the part we want to bring.
It was very interesting to listen to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Our warmest wishes.
It was truly a pleasure from my side too.
Alain Elkann interviews.